before we start, there's one thing I've been dying to do all morning.
Okay.
Okay.
With the sign language interpreter, could you say something directly in words to the audience, and I'll interpret? Go ahead.
Welcome to Resilience San Francisco.
That's awesome.
That was great.
One of the things you told us when we had a conversation a couple of months ago was that up until about 7 years ago, you didn't even consider yourself a designer. So what changed 7 years ago, and how do you consider yourself a designer now?
I'm not sure. Well, I guess I'm a designer now, probably. Yeah. But I got invited by mistake to the Aspen Design Summit. And the first person I met was Karen Hittner. And we had a great time, and she introduced me to Michael. But what I had been doing for 30 years is trying to find solutions to problems. And they said that was design. So I foolishly believed them. And then when everybody, this was the conference where everybody said something for 60 seconds in the evening to decide the future of the Aspen Design Summit. And I said that all of the designers in the world, as far as I knew, spent all their time addressing the problems of the richest 90% of the world's customers. And before I died, I wanted to see that silly ratio reversed. And from then on, I was considered a designer, so I've been faking it ever since.
That, by the way, is an awesome idea. Like, whenever you want to, there's someone you want to meet, just invite them to a conference and tell them they're a designer, and then they're part of us, right?
You know, also when we talked to you, you talked about how the market helps people find and take advantage of opportunities. And is the market the right model, or is there something else to help people? Because you do it through market and your distribution channels. And
I'm not sure it's the right model, but it's like somebody said about the jury system. It's got a lot of problems, but they couldn't think of anything that was better. I think the market has a lot of problems. All of the bad things that people said 30 years ago when I started using market forces, that businesses were the root cause of poverty. There's some element of truth to that, but creating new markets has a power and a scalability that it works better than anything else I found. So until something comes along that's better, I'm interested in creating new markets.
You're pretty far away, like many of our speakers today, you're pretty far away from where you started. Can you talk about, you started as a psychiatrist, correct? Or a psychologist?
I started as a baby in České Budějovice.
Okay. We just talked about that.
Yeah. So this is quite a
former Czechoslovakia. But your past profession, your first profession?
Well, first profession was I was a strawberry farmer.
Okay.
That was when I was about 14.
And that's not so far from what you're doing today.
well, yeah, because he's come full circle. You're a blueberry farmer now, aren't you?
Yeah, I have a wild blueberry farm in Nova Scotia.
I told you he does everything.
I'm a little nuts.
No, you're not.
But how did your training as a psychologist, how does that figure into your perspective and this moment when you said designers you realize that designers are sort of focusing on the wrong people and that we need to shift our focus? Has it informed what you're doing today?
First of all, I'm not a psychologist, I'm a psychiatrist. So psychologists are much lower down.
Where's Madeline? Let's have it out. Hey, Matt.
Yeah.
She's a psychiatrist too. We're all shrinks, see. But when I was working as a psychiatrist, I was developing a total mental health system for a population of 100,000 people in Southwest Denver. And one of the major issues was people who were chronically mentally ill, some of them homeless, living in the community. And I quickly learned that their poverty was more important determinant of their adjustment than any psychiatric therapies I could think of. So we started doing poverty strategies. We created a little version of HUD in Southwest Denver that applied for, we became a public housing authority that applied for Section 8 rent subsidies. We worked on housing, jobs, self-esteem, and stuff like that. That was more powerful than anything else we could do. Then I realized that the people who were poor in Southwest Denver were living on $600 or $700 a month, and there were people who were living on 1/20th of that in places like Bangladesh. So my wife is connected to the Mennonite system, so I went to Bangladesh to talk to some of those people in villages, much like I talk to psychiatric people as customers rather than as patients. And from what they told me, I mean, they said they were poor because they didn't have enough money. And they said that since most of them made their money from farming, what they needed the most to improve their livelihoods was water control for their crops, so they could grow crops in the dry season when prices were higher. So we started fooling around with that, and I never went back, except later on I tried to apply some of the stuff we had learned to working with the chronically mentally ill in Boulder. But it was sort of that kind of a circuitous path. But my life, I don't know what I'm going to be doing tomorrow.
Although some of the work that you're doing right now, I mean, there's this wonderful thread that you keep building new businesses and looking at different places to do that. You're doing a whole water filtration systems and all kinds of other businesses. Do you want to talk about a couple of those?
No, not really.
That's fine.
Sure.
Maybe we should have you ask us questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. What motivated you to do this?
Today?
Yeah.
You.
To talk to people like you.
Yeah. Oh,
So actually, selfishly, Nathan and I got to spend the last, 2 months having conversations with all the speakers like you and get to know you even better. So it's been great for us.
Well, and guess what? That's exactly what's been the center of my life. So what I've learned from the beginning, when I started 30 years ago, is, well, what I said in the book is that if you want to design something that is real and works, the first 3 steps are talk to the people who have the problem, listen to what they have to say, and learn everything you can about the context in which they live. So that's what I've been doing, and that has informed everything that I've done. So I have personally had long conversations with some $3,000 a day farmers in 20 countries. And what I learned from them is what I've been doing. Everything I've done comes from them. What I'm doing now, so just to sort of be somewhat responsive to one of your questions. With IDE, IDE was the first organization I started. It grew to about 450 staff in 12 countries, and then I handed it over 4 years ago. But what we learned is these farmers initially in Bangladesh that said they needed water control, we started with a treadle pump, and we figured out a way to manufacture, market, and sell treadle pumps. Much of the discussion this morning is very relevant because this is all what you'd call a distributed system. We didn't work with one centralized manufacturer. We helped stimulate 75 little workshops to make these things. We recruited 3,000 village dealers. We trained 3,000 well drillers. And that whole system sold treadle pumps. So we ended up selling altogether a little over 2 million of them in various countries. And each treadle pump adds $100 in net income. So that made a real impact. So we learned a lot, but IDE is a nonprofit using grants. But what we learned from that is that if you stimulate market forces, is if everybody in the market system, the little workshops, the village dealers that earn 12%, the well drillers, and most importantly the farmers, earn a living and act in their economic self-interest, you can really reach scale. So that's how we got to 2 million. But now, how do you go from 20 million to 100 million? So what I'm working on now is creating a new breed of international corporation. Each one of these corporations is has a mission of transforming the livelihoods of 100 million $2-a-day customers, generating 10 billion a year in sales, and sufficient profit to attract commercial venture capital internationally, which then removes the major bar to scale. But it's all done in a decentralized way. So one of these companies sells safe drinking water to people in villages. One is designed to break the barrier of cost for photovoltaics. So it will create a global system of village electricity for the billion people who don't have access. One of them converts waste biomass into a low carbon emitting form of coal, and one of them is involved in affordable nutrition. So that's really what I'm working on now.
People probably already know this about Paul, but I'll just bring this up. He does amazing work. Incredible. And in 1995, when I wanted to start a for-profit social venture model and I was trying to find other people, Paul's work really did inspire me. He has inspired many people in the social entrepreneurship movement. So thank you for all that you've done. That's incredible. I had another question though. I think we were talking about different examples that you just gave of the work that you're doing, and how would you transfer like that ownership? They already own all these businesses themselves. You're doing it very locally. It's the groups themselves that are doing that, so it's done very contextually. Can you talk a little bit more about how these businesses really run in that way?
Well, there's a structure to it. So we're using we're stealing the model of Tata Sons. That's a big multinational. So we create. So there's a central structure, and but it's delivered in radically decentralized ways. So there's a central structure, which is a holding company called Windhorse. That's a U.S.-based company. Then we formed a company in India called Spring Health, and that is a company that sells safe drinking water. My partner in India is Jacob Matthew. He's founded one of the top design firms in India, and he's acted as the CEO. Then that company actually, most of the people who lack safe drinking water are in scattered rural villages. So the question is, how can you actually profitably sell safe drinking water in villages with 300 to 500 families? So instead of creating a freestanding water shop, we partner with existing mom-and-pop shopkeepers that sell soap in packets and cigarettes and stuff like that. So these are called Kirana shops, and there's 10 million of them. They're really in India alone, and they're really the Walmart for villages. So we partner with those shopkeepers. We build a 3,000-liter cement tank next to the shop, but we don't build it. We hire local artisans to build it. We hire local artisans to do the plumbing and the electricity. And we use a radically affordable technology called electrochlorination, which basically makes chlorine out of running electricity through 5% salt water. That costs, you're familiar with that because D-Rev did some work on the early version of those things. That costs $250, 50 cents in electricity and salt, and it will purify 80,000 liters of water a day. But water is heavy, so instead of carrying water, we source the water from the shopkeeper's own contaminated well, and we purify it with chlorine and other water purifiers. The shopkeeper sells the water for 4 rupees for a 10-liter jerry can delivered to people's homes, and the shopkeeper hires delivery people who deliver it. So it's like the old-fashioned milk delivery system. So we've been doing a beta test in 35 villages with 20,000 customers, but that's just the pilot test. Now we're about to hopefully close the venture capital investment for commercial rollout, and we plan to be in 10,000 villages in 3 years.
Fabulous.
I had a question about how you work, because there's been some backlash in the developing world about here come all these first worlders that are going to solve our problems without necessarily doing the 3 things that you talked about, which is talk to the people who are in need and really study the situation. we often as designers are so motivated to solve problems that we don't recognize where maybe we aren't the ones that are supposed to solve the problems. Maybe we're a facilitator. But to what extent do you work with local people in order to help them solve their own problems? What's the partnership like?
I'm sorry, I don't work with local people. Local people do the work.
Right. But are they developing the solution? I get that you're hiring local people to build the solution. Are they also designing the solution with you, alongside you?
So, by accident, like most things, I ran into Jacob Matthew. He is the founder of Idiom Design, which is one of the top design firms in India. But after 25 years, he was getting a little bit bored with the standard commercial work. He wanted to do some social stuff. I thought he was too big. I hired them to do the branding, because branding, aspirational branding, is a critical part of commercial activity in villages. Long story short, he came to the village with me, and it was sort of love at first sight. So he became the CEO of the company. We have a COO who we hired. He was running 25,000 mobile phone shops. And then we have a local recruitment firm that hires local staff. So we have a small group of maybe 30 staff altogether. But all of our business associates come from those villages, and we train them. So the people doing the implementation are an Indian executive team. I'm chairman of the board. But not to be falsely modest, I mean, I have a sort of a knack of going to the heart of what a problem is and coming up with solutions, as does Jacob. So all of us participate. I come up with crazy ideas. Some of them don't work. Jacob does. Kishad does. Our business associates do. And it's always changing based on what we learn from customers. So part of the thing is the beta test has taken 8 months in 35 villages. The whole model is profoundly different. We learned by accident that the best way to market to poor people is, well, we were testing the water in a tank because it was contaminated. And a villager came along and asked our Indian technician what he was doing. He said, I'm testing the water. He said, will you test my water? So he did, and by the end of the afternoon, we did 23 tests, E. coli tests, made much cheaper. We found that if people tested, had their own water tested, and it had stuff growing in it, we had a 50% adoption rate compared with going and talking to villagers in focus groups. That was about 12%. So now we do a little festival where people bring their drinking water. We always close it off before everybody is satisfied, so that they're wanting more. And then we learned that when you incubate this stuff, we do it in a little styrofoam incubator with a light bulb. But we leave it with the villagers, because if we did it ourselves, they'd suspect that we try to do false positives. And we only tell them exactly what the results are. But if you tell a villager, show the villager what's growing, you better have somebody in a rickshaw trolley ready with a jerry can to sell at the point of that, and you better have somebody there reliably so it's stuff like that. That's all stuff we learned during the beta test. So the whole process to have any hope of being successful is you start with talking to customers, and then you keep learning from customers through the whole process and keep changing everything. I went on
yep.
too long.
No, that's
wonderful. Yeah. Do you have another question?
Well, I'm curious as to, what your advice is to, we have
that's right.
a fairly diverse audience here of designers, many designers, people in, education and government and sustainability and a variety of different sized businesses. And I'm going to speak for all of you really briefly, which is, I think that most people here want to make change in the world and want to get involved. What advice do you have for someone that doesn't yet see what they can do?
And they are designers. Most people.
Most, but not all.
Any problem, it was very basic for me. Talk to the person who has the problem, listen to what they have to say, and learn about the context. But that means something different to me, I think, than to most people. So I gave a talk at Cummins Engine, and I described the process. When I go to a village, I'll pick a typical family. I always go with somebody who's respected in the village, and I'll talk to them for 6 hours. and I'll walk with them through their fields, and I ask them what they had for breakfast and what they fed their dog, and when we get comfortable, and then I look at their cabbages and I check and see what cabbages, so I learn everything about their lives. And then I talk to another 6 or 7 families for an hour and a half. Never done that without coming up with at least one transformational idea. I think that applies. When I was talking to Cummins, they said, geez, that's interesting because we do a brilliant job of technology feedback. When we create a new diesel engine, we've got a sensor on that engine. It gives ongoing feedback to our computers. But then we run into things like, we did this great engine and it had more power, used less diesel, and the fleet owner put the diesels in his trucks, and he found that the truck drivers were having races and they were hot rodding, and they ended up burning up a lot of diesel. So they had all the feedback from the performance of the diesel engine, but they didn't have that in-depth feedback from the truck drivers of the trucks. So part of the thing, I guess my advice is whatever problem area you're interested in, go and talk to the people who have the problem and listen to what they have to say. It's not exactly rocket science.
Well, I think your background really does inform kind of how you do your work and how you ask questions. Almost every time that I'm ever in a conversation with Paul and I'm asking a question, like I'm really wanting to get an answer from him, he's like, wait, stop. How are you? What are you up to? And he always asks me questions. And I do think that is who you are. So I think your background, where you first started in your career, really does play today and how you are doing the work and coming up with these solutions.
I think you're right. One of the things is I have an insatiable curiosity about everything. And I really like to learn. Yeah. But I think that's, if you don't have that, how can you design anything?
Great. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you. This has been
Sure, for Paul.